Hi everyone, welcome back to the workshop. And today I wanted to take a look at some material. I know a lot of people ask, where can you get material for your diode lasers? And depending on what's available in your area and what other tools you have, that can be difficult. With these diode lasers, their working area is relatively small compared to your large sheets of plywood you can get at most hardwood dealers. So you need to break it down. Well, if you don't have access to a table saw, or maybe you don't have a vehicle, you can bring those big sheets home, and your store might not want to break them down for you. There are a few options, and one that I came across is actually available to most people in the US, and that is actually through Home Depot's website. So they sell these craft packs of birch plywood, and this is their Pure Bond birch plywood. Packs of 10 in both what they call a 1/4 inch and 5/32. So this one is actually just a touch under 1/4 inch. When I measured it out, it was about 0.2, just about 0.2 inches. And then this 5/32 is a little bit bigger than an 1/8. I think it came in as 0.135 inches. So it gets you kind of close to those sizes we like to use. But the question is it any good? And how well does it work in the lasers? Now, the size is actually 12 inches by about 19. And that's give or take a little bit. It's actually about a 1/16 under 12 inches, but it's actually a little bit longer than 19 inches by about a 1/16 to an 1/8. So, when factoring in the size, you're going to want to take into account that there's usually a little bit of underage or overage based on how they cut it. The other thing is how flat they are. Now, some of these I've taken a look, and there's maybe some slight bowing in some of them, and you're going to get that in various different plywoods. So you do need to work on your hold down methods. But what I want to look at in this video is these sheets. Can they cut well? Can they engrave well? How does that work? I'm going to be using both my xtool 10 watt as well as my xtool D1 Pro 20 watt to test that out to hopefully give a good baseline for your typical diode lasers. I know some people might have 5 watts, and there's definitely others out there that have 30 and 40 watts, but kind of 10 to 20 watt is your average. So I thought if this works well on those, it'll give you a good baseline for what it might work for on your lasers. So that's the summary of what I want to do. We're going to be doing some cut tests. We'll do some engrave tests, take a look at how it functions, and if we've run into any issues in here. And we'll see at the end of the video what my thoughts are, and hopefully you can surmise whether this might be something that works for you. So with all that out of the way, let's jump into the machines and start cutting and engraving and see how it does. All right, so I've got the xtool 10 watt in my enclosure. We've got the air hooked up and everything, and I'll be cutting on the honeycomb panel. Now, as I mentioned, these are about 19 wide, and so that's obviously wider than the laser, but the way I've set up my enclosure is this honeycomb is actually flat with the sides, so I can shift it side to side and be able to not waste it without having to cut this down. So depending on your setup and your enclosure, you may be able to slide it around a little bit to get to it, but that's how I'm going to be dealing with it without actually cutting this down. Now, this sheet is fairly straight, but it might have a slight little twist to it, and so I will be using some of these wooden clamps just to help hold it flat as well. So, and then I will show you my file setup in Lightburn that's going to do both a raster engrave and a cut test all in one job, so we can kind of just look at it really quickly. So I'm going to get this set up in here, we'll run that, and we'll take a look at the results after it's done. All right, the 1/4 inch test is done. Let's pop this out of here and see. right, so here it is, the 1/4 inch test, fresh off the laser. It looks like we got a pretty deep engraving on there. And so, we'll want to clean that up just a little bit, dust it off with the air compressor, maybe sand it, check that out. But it looks like we could even bump it up a little bit higher, because in this 90 and 100% range, we're definitely kind of getting a little lack of definition there. So by speeding it up a little bit, that should stretch that out better. And then on the cut test at 100 millimeters a minute, 90 and 100% power, they dropped out. But as you see on the back side, some of these are wanting to fall. So if I just kind of shake this out a little bit, I'm not pushing on any of them. There we got a little bit more. And so now we've got 90 and 100 at 150 millimeters a minute, as well as the 80%. And I'm guessing if I was just to push on, yep, this 70% at 100, and maybe even, no. They're wanting to come on the back side a little bit. They're wanting to pop out, but they're still being held in by a little bit of nibs there of fibers. But the cut is actually fairly clean. There's not a lot of extra charring on the edges of these. I don't know if you can see that, but here on the edge of this one, if I can block out the background so it actually focuses on this. It's a nice caramelization, and it went through this 1/4 inch material at only 10 watts of power. So, that's a good deal. Yeah, it's at 150 millimeters a minute, but, for a 10 watt laser, cutting through close to 1/4 inch material and not being a charred mess, looking really positive. So let's go ahead and we'll run the smaller one on the 10 watt as well, see how those results are, and then we'll jump to the same tests on the 20 watt. All right, the thinner material finished on the 10 watt, so let's pop this out. Did cut through, and we'll just kind of tap them, see which ones fall out. All right, so here we go. I did not change the engraving test on here. I like to run things a couple times before I make changes. So this one also definitely kind of blew out at the upper end. So we would probably increase the speed from 5,000 to maybe 6 or 7 and see where that kind of line is, where we're just getting some definition on these upper levels. And that should help us get a better gradient overall. But as you see here in our cut test, doing a lot better. Definitely up there in the 250 millimeters a minute range, 90 and 100%. And all the way down to 60% down at 100 millimeters a minute. But even some of those, I think we have a few more that'll just kind of poke out. So like that one, the 50% one, yeah, that was not held in very tight. That one, well, there's just a little bit of a fiber, so almost squeezing up into 300. So as you can see here, definitely an improved speed, just going a little bit thinner. So depending on what you're looking for, if you're needing that wider, more 1/4 inch material, it's still viable. It's going to be a little bit slower, but definitely a lot of speed gain on this. Now you could play with your focus depth, see if you could dial that in a little bit, try to get the focal point more to the middle of each material and probably squeak out a little bit more. Also, depending on your air assist setup, but everything seems fairly consistent. The caramelization around the outside is good. And so far, I'm fairly pleased with this. I'm not really seeing what I would say are like streaks running through it. Sometimes you get that where there's like a glue section running through the middle of it, which can cause just this weird line where it's not cutting through. But I'm not seeing that in there. And as a matter of fact, on the back side, if you look at where it's failing to cut through, it's just kind of fading off evenly. So that's a good sign that the material is fairly consistent. Now, this is just the first sheets I've been running. Obviously, I'd want to run a few more sheets to really make that determination, but it's a good sign from the beginning. So what I want to do next is I'm going to pull the 10 watt out of here. We're going to drop in the 20 watt. We're going to run the same tests on these, so we'll get an idea how that machine is going to operate, which will also give us a better idea on going from 10 to 20 watts. Maybe a percentage increase. I know a lot of people wonder, is it going to double or not? I'm not going to expect double the speeds on the 20 watt over the 10 watt, but we should see a pretty decent increase, maybe 150 to 160% increase in speed, but not quite 200. So I'm gonna get everything swapped out. We'll run these tests again with the 20 watt and see how it goes. All right, the roughly 1/8 inch, 5/32 inch material is done on the 20 watt. So let's go ahead and pull it out. Went ahead and used the same sheet from the 10 watt test. And we'll pick this up, tap it to try to get any ones that are loose out. And here we have it. We have a few in there that didn't want to pop loose. But we'll start with that engraving test. Show you that there. It's about the same as the 10 watt. I did increase the speed to 10,000 millimeters a minute, and we are still getting that top end kind of blowing away. So on the next one, I'm going to actually increase that a little bit more, since the 20 watt can go a little bit faster, and see if we can get a really nice gradient there. But as far as cutting, the things that just dropped out, we got up to 400 millimeters a minute, 100%, 90% power. And we have a few abnormalities in the middle here, but I think if I just kind of push on them, yep, they're just kind of popping out. There's just fractional little spots holding some of these on. So, we'll try pushing from both sides. So this here, all right, so we have one right in the middle here. You can see that at 250 and 90. There must be some just little thing that's holding that in, because I'm pushing on it and it's not wanting to just pop out, which means that it would give us a little bit of hassle. So that's the first abnormality I've seen with this material. Everything else is fairly consistent. And if you look on the back there, it's actually fairly decent. Let's get the light on that a little bit better. So again, we're getting fairly consistent, kind of fading off. So I don't think it's necessarily streaks of glue in there, but we do have a couple of those areas where they're fading really quick. So just comparing that to the 10 watt one, here's where you can see doubling your power of your laser is not necessarily going to double the speed. So the 10 watt, we were able to squeak out 300 millimeters a minute at 100% power. And on the 20 watt, we did jump up to 400 and we were able to get through at 90. It really wanted to get through at 450. So possibly another run would get that through. But as you can see here, we didn't jump from 300 millimeters a minute to 600 millimeters a minute. We got a little more power out of it, but not necessarily double. So I'm going to go ahead and now run the 1/4 inch material and see how that does, and then we'll kind of wrap it all up. All right, our last test cut is done on the 1/4 inch material with the 20 watt machine. Let's take a look at how it did. Had the cut settings maybe a little high because I didn't change them for the outside, but we got through mostly. And again, let's tap so anything that's going to fall out is. That looks like it's mostly it. So here we go, and I increased the engraving up to 12,500 millimeters a minute, and it's not quite as blown out in the upper end here. Very little difference between 90 and 100%. So In this type of material, if I was doing a raster engrave, I may actually bump my top end down to 85, 90% and just use that range. But overall, it's looking pretty good. We're getting a pretty quality gradient there. And then as far as cut quality, it's a pretty linear slope there. There isn't any abnormalities here. We just tapped it to see if everything fell out, and we got up to 300 millimeters a minute, 100% power. Look at the back side here. You can kind of see there are a few that look like they might just push out. So let's just, yeah, that one just kind of popped out. Same with that one. That one was barely in, just kind of held in by friction. So as you see, we're actually getting a little bit of improvement here. Maybe even, that one's got a small fiber. So really 300 millimeters a minute from 80 to 100% power now. We have just on the back side of these, maybe you can see there's some little fibers just holding them on. So compared to the 10 watt in this material, where it topped out at 150, and then jumping up to the 20 watt, we are doubling our speed on this one. You know, we're getting up into that 300 millimeters a minute, and we're getting clean cuts. Now, anytime you run a material test like this, and you get that kind of top end, you always got to be careful, because like we noticed with the other one, we had that one little imperfection in the middle. I usually like to back it off maybe 10% or so. With this one, I would probably run it at 250 millimeters a minute for my cuts to get through this material fairly consistently, because there's nothing worse than doing a big layout, having it all cut out, except for there's one little chunk that's not wanting to come because it didn't quite get through some sort of imperfection. So, but overall, pretty happy with this material. Like I say, there was just that one little piece here on the 20 watt in the middle of our grid for some reason that it's holding on. But so far, very consistent cutting. It's nice caramelization and not a lot of extra overburn of material. So hopefully that's a fairly clean product and something that I think I could recommend you using based on my initial tests here. Obviously, having a good honeycomb and having good air assist is going to make a big difference on cutting. And then with it, some of the panels were just a little warped, but having some sort of hold down mechanism. I like to use either the 3D printed or these wooden pins that actually go down into the honeycomb and hold it down. Magnets can work, but these give sometimes a little more physical hard stop as well, so you can almost set them up as jigs. But all right, so I hope that testing this material and giving you an option to check out was useful. If you have any questions or comments about it, go ahead and leave those down below. I will have links to this material as well as the xtool lasers that I used in this video if you're interested in those. However, this kind of material could be used on any laser. You just need to run material tests for your own. Now, I do have a video on using the built-in material test within Lightburn that works really well. This is a new one I'm playing around with. I'm probably gonna spend a little time dialing in this test to get it to fit for my needs. And if it works out well, I will share that in a later video as well. Anyway, thanks for stopping by and checking out this video. I hope you found it informational, and maybe you want to check out this material as well. So I've got more to come. I'm going to be doing another project video with this, so definitely check that out as I put it out, and we'll see how this material holds up. I have more sheets to go through, so we'll be using it for sure. If you have any questions or comments, go ahead and leave that down below. I will try to get back to them. Otherwise, thanks again for stopping by. Most importantly, I hope you get out of your workshop and make something too. We'll catch you next time.